think it's worth, I guess, maybe getting into that a little
Yeah.
bit, you know, and like what all of these sort of experiences he had, and then, you know, to talk about the origins of the fundamental physics group. So, you know, you mentioned Roswell. You know, I found this interview. It's actually published or on the ISGP website, which is it's got a page on Sarfatti with a bunch of sources, and it's got a bunch of quotes from this May 20th, 2010 interview with Alan Waite of Praxis for Life. And here Sarfatti, I think Jimmy actually quoted from this in your first episode, but Sarfatti speaks like really candidly about a lot of his life and stuff, more so in this interview than he does in other ones. And obviously this is 2010. This is probably around the time that David Kaiser is like going around doing the interviews for this book. I know a lot of the interviews are dated 2008, 2009. You know, so Sarfatti at the time that he's conducting this interview knows that Kaiser is writing the book, but it's way before this recent UFO spat that's got him popular, and it's before this book came out, which I think helped Sarfatti get back on the sort of academic and public speaking circuit a little bit. But one of the things he mentioned, you know, you mentioned Roswell in here, is that he believes that he met Phil Corso, who, you know, wrote the Day After Roswell book, when he was a child, even before he started his participation in the Gifted Children's Program at Columbia with Walter Breen. And actually, you know, the main guy running it was this psychologist named William Sheldon, who does get mentioned. You know, you guys talk about him a little bit in the episode with Jimmy. But I did find some quotes about William Sheldon that basically say, like, he was an outright Nazi and, like, did not believe the Holocaust happened. Like, you know, it's not a 6 million type of guy. So here's Sarfatti telling this story. My grandfather, even before this Columbia Project, the Columbia Project is the Sheldon and Breen Gifted Kids program, was definitely some kind of intelligence thing. Oh, my grandfather, even before the Columbia Project, which was definitely some kind of intelligence thing. Before that, my grandfather worked for the U.S. Army. He was a veteran, and this was when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I was actually living with my grandparents, and after school, I would go meet my grandfather, who was at the Army Quartermaster's Corps in the Garment District in New York. And that was a very strange situation. Maybe I was 10 or 11 years old, but I would hang out there and play, and they had a laboratory there. They had different cold weather uniforms, hot weather, that sort of stuff. It was like a museum. I was given free rein of the place. My grandfather drove around these Army officers. My grandfather was driving the car, and I would sit in the back seat with these colonels. They must have been psychiatrists. I mean, they were always analyzing, and it was all kind of consistent. Because at the time I was going to build rockets, go to the moon, or all kinds of stuff. But all of this was encouraging me. I was actually in the company of Army officers a lot. That's when I saw this fun colonel named Phil Corso, who wrote the book The Day After Roswell many years later in 1997. I'm pretty sure his Colonel Corso was one of those guys, really, though I can't prove it. This would have been around 1950, but it's a consistent story and it all makes sense. So there, like, he's basically saying that, like, even before his God phone experience and before he was a part of this Walter Breen, William Sheldon, Columbia Gifted Kids program, that he was meeting Army colonels and Army psychiatrists who may have been or may not have been Phil Corso of Day After Roswell fame through his grandfather. You know, so this is...
I noticed this. I wanted to flag it in like one of the interviews where he just kind of out of nowhere says like my grandfather, you know, like he studied physics in Europe with like all the greats, and like he was and I was like, wait, like Jack Sarfatti's grandfather was like a prominent physicist in Europe? Like I totally missed that about him, but there it is right there. He lived with them, too, as a child.
Grandfather. This guy's in the Army. He doesn't say that he's a physicist. He basically just says he's, like, driving Army officers around, so I don't know what his
interesting.
role was.
He didn't say what I'm trying to find his grandfather's, like, name right now or whatever, but he made this kind of bold claim that I almost thought sounded, like, not real because, like, he's, I don't know, had such a crazy life that, like, oh, yeah, my grandfather was also, like, this kind of, like, globe-trotting, like prominent physicist guy. I always thought he was just kind of like a working class, like Jewish kid from New York, you know, who like wasn't particularly like came from a kind of prominent academic background, like a classic, you know, post World War II, like American kid that, you know, was like the first in his family to go to college or something like that. But apparently not so. I don't know.
Here's a little more on that. So this is him continuing in this. And here he's, again, speaking very candidly in a way that, like, in his recent media appearances, he never speaks this way about his experiences. Mm-hmm. But he says, so this has all been a kind of consistent picture of what looks like a very long-term intelligence effort, definitely involving the British, definitely involving the Americans, and probably other agencies as well, to investigate these kinds of fringe areas which are now called UFOs and the paranormal, and how physics could explain it. This idea to try to explain consciousness and possible flying saucers, the big thing back then, was part of this project. So I was involved from the very beginning. So the military, they were always interested in stuff like that. I mean, the military is more open to the paranormal. So one reason that possibly the Army became interested in me was because of my uncle. They wanted to see if there was any sort of familial thing in the gene pool. So apparently his uncle, he goes on to talk about this, served in the Pacific, mm-hmm. and was basically like, he says he had a reputation of being a psychic, you see, mm-hmm. because he was in a lot of combat. He was overseas for 4.5 years. And even when he was not in the jungles, they had him teaching in New Zealand or something, a jungle warfare instructor. I guess he got the reputation among his peers in the Army of having some sort of precognition of events. Oh, he's getting saved and things like that, being lucky. And I guess he developed the reputation of being a psychic of some sort.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, yeah, like a lot of his, the family, I'm looking at the ISGP kind of like summary of it now, where he's dropped so many things. He says randomly that he actually did talk a lot about the gifted children kind of program. And he even says apparently there was a similar program at Berkeley. There's a friend of mine called Hank Harrison who's a part of it, who's the father of Courtney Love. Actually, Courtney Love's, dad. He apparently, ... You might want to actually talk to him about the program. It was tied up with the intelligence community, definitely with the government. It was kind of like the X-Men. I mean, what they were trying to do, we were tested. They were trying to induce paranormal powers in us, like telepathy, psychokinesis, things like that. Yeah. There were experiments, and they would just sit with the kids, trying to get them to move objects. We never moved anything, but there was a whole program going on about this. Also, they talked about aliens and flying saucers, trying to figure out how they fly and all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of science fiction. Oh, and I met Isaac Asimov at that time. So, like, damn, okay. Like, it's weird that, I don't know.
I listened to another interview with him where he told basically the same story and used the same analogy of the X-Men. Where he said
directed finally in the 2000s by Bryan Singer.
It actually is kind of interesting because he was talking about he was talking about how like this would all take place at the salons that were being held by Walter Breen. Right. That Walter Breen would be holding these kind of like salons where they would do like talk about science and physics, but also do like these kind of like artistic things, and like Ayn Rand like would show up according to him, and also like these
Alan Greenspan. Yeah,
Alan Greenspan was there, and also the Men in Black in his words. But I think by Men in Black he just meant like not like weird android like aliens or whatever, but just like G-men,
they'd come during give pep talks about being patriotic and anti-communist and all that kind of stuff. There were a lot of weird things going on,
and give them X-Men tests, I guess. Yeah, so
I mean, this is like 20 years before Stargate at SRI, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is very interesting. Like the fact that, I mean, also, I think we do have there's a little interesting synchronicity with the time here of getting a phone call in 1953 saying that in 1973, those are roughly the exact years that like the original MK Ultra program was operative, funny. Right? Yeah. Like it was like literally 53, and then I think around 73, like Disclosure, Seymour Hersh dutifully exposed some of it, and then Richard Helms destroyed all the files, etc. And it seemed like they were almost ready by that point. I mean, they had already had MK Search and a couple other subsequent programs that might have done this. He does say, like, the guy, he mentions one guy was like, it might have been the guy who, I forget, the guy who died in the 80s, who bankrolled him in the 80s.
George
who's like,
Koopman.
It was the other one. It was it Hal something? Not Hal Puthoff, but
there was a guy named Larry something, and then also Chip.
It was
it a guy associated with the CIA? He's the Chip something. I got it up here. Was the one who he said was the director of MK Ultra in the Bay Area.
Right.
Chipman.
He said it was Harold Chipman. That was what it was. Who I wrote down in a different interview a couple months ago. I just wrote sus Catholic CIA guy. I'm not. It might be involved with. He did claim that Knights of Malta and Opus Dei, somebody from Knights of Malta and or Opus Dei, which might have been Harold Chipman, wanted to set up a Sarfatti Institute at the Jesuit University of San Francisco in the 80s, but it never ended up happening.
The Sarfatti Institute, if I'm almost positive, was Harold Chipman, but then he died before that could all happen. I didn't realize. So I mean, that's
Sarfatti
that Catholic
claims
thing is another interesting connection. But
Sarfatti claims also in one of those interviews that Harold Chipman was like, quote, plutonium poisoned by the Soviets, and that's why he died.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay,
who knows if that's true. But yeah, he did say that Harold Chipman was, quote, like the guy who did all the LSD stuff in San Francisco in like the late 60s, meaning not Operation Midnight Climax, but like the fucking Summer of Love and the Human Being and like all that other stuff, you know? So, I mean, Sarfatti, you know.
And then basically, I mean, to your point about the timing, right, that the phone call first starts in 1953, and then he meets these people in 1973 once that stage of MK Ultra is over.
Right.
And Harold Chipman, who is running MK Ultra in San Francisco, is now funding all of this remote viewing research at SRI using the Institute of Noetic Sciences as a cutout, as well as other places, you know, for the CIA or DIA or whatever. And then after all that happens in the 1980s, like 1985, once Chipman is, in a formal sense, retired from the CIA, at least on paper, then he starts funding Sarfatti out in the open on his own as like a private philanthropist. And that's when the Sarfatti Institute stuff is proposed, you know, in the mid-80s. So it is a very interesting timeline where essentially, like, as this cohort of people who all got the God phone call and were part of these gifted kids programs in the 50s, you know, including Sarfatti and Uri Geller, Hal Puthoff, maybe also Alan Greenspan or whatever, right?
Philip K. Dick, someone who did hang out in the circles of the fundamental physics group, Sarfatti says. Jimmy said that Philip K. Dick got a God phone call. I've never seen like...
I can speak on that.
Okay.
So...
For access to the full-length episode, subscribe to the Hour of Frequency at patreon.com/subliminaljihad.